And finally, Dr. and Professor Agustí Cerrillo from GADE Group will present his book. And the title is, you have the presentation here. Okay, nice English, Professor. The principle of integrity in the public procurement, mechanisms to prevent the conflicts of interest and the fight against corruption. It's about Spain.
Yeah. Okay. Bon dia. Bé, gràcies per permetre'm venir a parlar del meu llibre. I began a research 4 years ago when I was preparing my research project for the chair in administrative law, after having into account different data about how corruption is working in Spain. As you can see in the presentation, nowadays corruption is the second problem of the Spanish people. The direct cost of corruption in public procurement, according to European reports, is almost 2,000 million euros per year. And also, it has been stated that corruption increases the cost in public procurement between 20–25% up to 50% of the cost of the contract. So these are really big problems. And I wanted to know how could administrative law try to improve this situation. And I saw that in the last years, the principle of integrity has been seen by different international organizations like the World Trade Organization, the OECD, or the European Union as a catchword that could group all those different mechanisms that can help public administrations to fight against corruption. As you can see, integrity refers to ensuring that public officials and employees act in accordance with the law without any personal interest or any personal motivation or any personal goal that could trump the general interest. So integrity tries to guarantee the coherence, the completeness, and the congruence between the activity of public officials and public employees with the law and with the ethics standards that they may act according with. But integrity goes beyond ethics. Integrity is not only an ethic value which has to be followed by public officials and employees, and it's also a word, it's also a variety of mechanisms intended to enable public officials to guarantee good administration while they do their public work. There are many different mechanisms under integrity principle. You can see them in the presentation, and I will try to explain them briefly. First, we can see transparency mechanisms, good management mechanisms, conflict of interest prevention mechanisms, and then finally, control and accountability mechanisms. Transparency mechanisms try to ensure that citizens can know what is happening inside public administration offices. There are many different mechanisms to guarantee transparency in public administration. I have classified them into 3 groups. Active transparency, which means that public administration itself disseminates information to people, to enterprises, about public procurement. Then we have another mechanism, which is passive transparency, which means that people can ask public administration to give them information they are interested in. And finally, collaborative transparency, which means that people can reuse public sector information in order to improve public transparency. I won't go on with this mechanism, but I have to say that and although it's important to guarantee integrity in public administration, it has to be said that transparency sometimes has to be limited in order to guarantee other principles or other rights of people. Then we have a second group of mechanisms to guarantee public integrity, which I include under the term good management. Good management in public procurement is guaranteed by improving the organization of public procurement and also the procedure used to award public contracts. I have especially focused my attention in the book to see how can ICT improve the management of public procurement procedures. And I've seen that nowadays public electronic means can have an important role in this way. To go on, I will now introduce you into the third group of mechanisms to improve integrity, which are those stated to prevent conflicts of interest. Conflicts of interest refer to any situation in which the people involved in procurement can have any particular financial or economic interest that could be perceived to compromise their impartiality or their independence. It's important to say that the conflict of interest is the main door into corruption. So in those situations where there is a conflict of interest, if this situation of conflict of interest is not well managed, it can lead into a corruption case. There are many different instruments in our regulation that help public officials and public employees to prevent a possible conflict of interest. You have in the presentation the list: obligations of information about their activity or their interest, restrictions on certain activities, disciplinary and criminal measures, mechanisms to ensure both knowledge and assistance for public officials and employees, and finally, the use of codes of conduct, which can state the standards of the behavior which have to be respected by public officials and public employees while they are acting in their office. Finally, the last group of mechanisms are those under the term control and accountability mechanisms. These mechanisms try to oversight and assure that the activity of public officials and public employees are have acted according with the legal standards and also with the ethic standards that should govern their behavior. There are many different control and accountability mechanisms in Spanish and in the European regulation. I have studied them all, and I have also analyzed which is their efficiency in order to see if the different control and accountability mechanisms stated are efficient to guarantee integrity and also to prevent conflicts of interest and to fight against corruption. And I have especially focused in these three mechanisms because they are quite new in our regulation, and I think that they can have an important role in order to prevent conflicts of interest and also corruption in Spanish management of public procurement. Procurement courts, anti-fraud offices, and also whistleblowers protection, which tries to help people that know about any corruption case to take it into before the court, but also to try to protect them against any case of activity against that people. And after having analyzed all these mechanisms, I tried to answer a final question in my book, which was about the legal nature of the principle of integrity. The last question I made while I was doing this research was just to know if the integrity principle is only a concept under which there are many different mechanisms, or if it has a legal nature that we could consider integrity as a legal principle. And the final conclusion I reached was that integrity is not only a word catching all mechanisms to prevent conflicts of interest and to fight against corruption, but it's also a legal principle, that it means that it has a specific role preventing conflicts of interest and fighting against corruption. Thank you all for your attention.